Okay, so I am David Rodriguez. I'm the extension horticulturalist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Our topic today is growing a home fruit orchard. That is my email address. If we don't get to all your fruit tree related questions today, or if you have any other inquiries, do not hesitate to send me a brief email. If you need something identified, send quality images attached to the email, not as part of the email. We'll try our best to get them answered today. So we have quite a bit of subject matter that I want to cover today before 1 o'clock. And if you do need a particular question, like Denise said, do chat it in. Make sure it's fruit tree related, and one if possible. And if we do have time at the end, we'll try really our best to answer. Otherwise, you have my email address that you can send me any other questions that you might have or follow-ups as well. So that's me. Some of y'all know how I look like. Um, I don't like to use my camera. I get a little confused, but y'all know who I look like, and there's my picture. So here we go. Okay. So this is the most important slide that we'll review and cover, and I'm gonna kind of highlight some main things here. And on fruit tree culture, as well as ornamentals and vegetable and other related plant subject matter that I tend to cover, we really need to get these principles down. And y'all's homework assignment is, if you're not utilizing Aggie horticulture, our fruit tree specialists have done a wonderful job with specifics on each fruit tree that you might be interested in. So we're going to kind of cover some trees that you might currently have. We're going to cover a few trees because we're limited on time today that you might consider adding as well. But please study up on these trees, and Aggie horticulture has a lot of great. So the key here, just like shade trees, when I do my shade tree and flowering tree talk, planting quality trees at the right time. Fanix Garden Center, if you live locally here in San Antonio, just received a shipment of bare root fruit trees. Or if you ordered trees from Walmax Nursery, bare root from De Leon, Texas, them two are the only that I know that still carries bare root trees. So if I'm doing a commercial orchard for large quantity trees, it takes me a year to get ready for planting. And to save money, I either bring them down from out of California, possibly Tennessee, or for you and me, Walmax Nursery or Fanix. If you go that route of bare root trees, most trees nowadays are containerized trees. So in reality, you can plant a containerized plant year round. But the best assortment of finding quality fruit trees is January, which is the traditional month, to about March. A lot of the nurseries and garden centers are doing a much better job when they bring in their shade trees. When we say fall is for planting, uh, October, November. So you start seeing quite a bit of these fruit trees. So we can safely say October through now is the best time, but you can plant container trees if you can find quality trees anytime. But of course, you want to do it when it's the best time, which we said already. These are so basic principles, but we have to cover them because these are the questions and problems that we tend to have. They need to be planted in full sun, just like your tomato plants. They need good soil drainage. Dr. George Ray McKeechin, who used to be our state fruit tree specialist for many years, he's retired and currently runs at the river bottom in College Station, the Pecan Research Station there. And if you find his old Fruit Trees of the South book, which I would highly recommend if you can find it still on Amazon or somewhere like that. Dr. George Ray McKitchen always said, dig a hole, and fill it up with water. And if it drains, you're doing good. If it doesn't drain within 12 hours or so, I don't think that tree needs to be there. So a lot of us either have solid rock, maybe sand in some parts. I know we get people from all over the state listening to this webinar today. So you have to know your soil. The main thing, does it drain? If it doesn't drain well, maybe particularly heavy clay type soils, maybe we berm it up a little bit, do a raised bed, you might say, but you need excellent drainage. Excellent air circulation. With the exception of pecan trees, most of these fruit trees that you might consider adding to your home orchard, 15-foot, ideally 20-foot spacing from one center of the tree to the next. When these trees get old and matured, they need that air circulation to minimize disease and insect pressure. You know, we have wooden fences often in these residential areas, and that could be an issue, as well as we like to plant too many plants in and around our landscape. So you need that sun, you need that soil drainage, you need that excellent air circulation, and follow the proper spacing guidelines. I've seen you guys when you buy fruit trees as well as shade trees and plants in general. Folks, larger trees are not always the best. You know, get a good tree that has a good canopy in balance with an excellent root system. We always look at the top, but we never look at that root system. So make sure they're in balance. And again, larger trees are not always the best. A lot of y'all are local here in and around the San Antonio area, but again, we have folks throughout the state listening to this, and they might see the webinar once it's archived. So check with your county extension agent with the 254 great counties in our great state, and or visit the Aggie Horticulture website on each fruit tree species you're looking for, and get varieties that have proven the test of time. Deal with independent nurseries, you know, folks that have been in business, mom and pop. You know, locally we have Fanix Garden Center, Millburgers, the two Rainbow Gardens. They work with extension, and they carry the right varieties, and they always try to carry a few unique ones and see how they perform in their county. But get the proven, the tested time varieties. You have to plant it proper. You know, basically you dig a hole and plant it in the same soil. You know, we baby shade trees and we baby fruit trees. So don't dig a huge crater in the ground and backfill it with potting soil or landscape mix. You know, that's not good. Where are those roots going to grow? So we have to work with what we have, you know, and follow the above guidelines. A lot of these trees, particular fruit trees, you have to train them, you have to prune them, you have to maintain them. And this is where we will put the big X. From here and the next verbiage below, we don't follow these guidelines. And this is where we get insects, disease, low yields, and other. This is the key, okay? These are the key. Weed management. Weeds are thieves. Go into very successful peach orchards, pecan orchards, commercial folks. The best ones that have been making money and have been successful have an excellent weed management program. Remember, weeds bring insects. Weeds take nutrition and water from the plants. And if y'all have seen some of my webinars from the past, the horticulture principles are all the same. So control and manage the weeds. Nutrition, depending what part of the state and your area that you're planting, often we don't have the richest soils. So we have to fertilize and use the right fertilizers at the right time. And again, we have those specific guidelines with the crop that you're looking for on the Aggie Horticulture website. Irrigation. You have to have not only quantity as well as quality of water on commercial orchards, but this holds for true when it comes to that one tree or multiple trees you have in your backyard that you're trying to get fruit yields. So you have to water. And a good rule of thumb to follow is if you have fruit that's set on your trees from start to end, which can be months on a lot of these species, particularly coming out of the June, July, August hot summer months, in lieu of significant deep rain events, you need to water these trees or supplement irrigate 1 inch to 2 inches a week in and around that drip line and possibly up to the main trunk. That's why we have to control these weeds, properly fertilize, and you have to water. There are very, very few to no successful, profitable, commercial fruit tree orchards in our great state of Texas. Um, very few. So you have to spray. And meaning spraying, often it's prophylactic applications of insecticides and diseases, particularly in spring and early summer after big rain events, lack of sunlight, and high humidity days. You have to spray, but in spraying, y'all are very limited on over-the-counter products that you can buy at your local independent nursery, garden center, or feed store. But there are some options. And when you look at the publications on the Aggie Horticulture website, we give you the traditional insecticides, fungicides, as well as organic and natural that we deem that have good effects and will work. So you can use a combination of both. The bottom line of all the above that we've just briefly have covered, and you doing your homework and studying up more on the Aggie Horticulture website on these specific crops, is slow it down. Slow it down. Y'all buy on impulse. Y'all go to the nursery, see this beautiful tag on that peach or plum or whatever, and get overly excited and buy on impulse and just stick it in the ground. Maybe you get a few peaches, and then normally most of these trees decline. So please, please, please slow it down. A successful and profitable commercial orchard takes a minimum of 1 to 2 years to find everything we just talked about before any tree is planted in the ground. So follow these guidelines and you'll get at least a 90 on your next exam, because once you start bragging that you're going to harvest the best peaches, plums, etc., then we're going to get a hailstorm or that squirrel or mockingbird happen. So never brag. We're always humble as farmers, and we want y'all to be successful with that one tree you have or other trees that you're going to be adding here this coming weekend. So let's talk about some fruit trees. So there's lots and lots of fruit trees to consider planting. The most favorite is the peach tree. The biggest fruit tree that's sold is peach trees. The biggest tree that is stressed or killed is, guess what? Is peach trees. Peach trees, if you go to a commercial orchard, pick your own or just an orchard in general, very pristine trees. They're on a specific program for spraying insecticides, fungicides, both traditional and or organic. There's certain trimming and training on them initially when they're establishing, as well as through the line. So peaches are the highest input tree of all the fruit trees. So we're really not going to talk about peaches today, but again, I want y'all to study up if you want to get more in depth on peaches. If you're in and around the Bexar County area, San Antonio, particularly probably about 30 to 50-mile radius, the champion of the peaches that we can try to grow here is La Feliciana. So look for this one. There is a peach called John Fanick peach, which is a sport selection of La Feliciana, but for sure, in our part of the state, this is the one really worth growing. Look at all those beautiful peaches there. So the fruit trees that we're going to really kind of cover that I think y'all should be growing if you're not already doing it or will be adding to your home fruit orchard this weekend are fruit trees, what we call an extension horticulture earth kind fruit trees. And I would really encourage everyone listening to this webinar today and invite your friends, family, and neighbors to take the Earth Kind Challenge that we have archived on the homepage of Aggie Horticulture. And it kind of gives you an overview of your landscape, your yard, everything, and see how kind of a Earth Kind person you are in your garden and in your landscape. And and it gives you little study guides and information how you can get even better. So EarthKind uses real world effectiveness, extension horticulture, and from our land grant university, simple, practical ways, low inputs, and the best of conventional, traditional, as well as organic and natural that's economically feasible, that makes sense, and saves you money in your pocketbook. So these are some of the trees which Extension Horticulture considers earth kind to consider planting in your home fruit orchard. Pears. If you look at old homesteads, particularly in the rural areas of Texas, maybe all you have is an old structure, maybe an old barn out there. What do you see? You see old pears, pears that are 100 plus years old. Okay. So we consider pears the ultimate earth kind tree. Now, if you go to the fancy HEBs and look at all these nice fruit that they have, particularly pears, man, they got some nice, delicious dessert-like pears. Well, we cannot grow those here, i.e. Bartlett, Anjou, and some of these other ones. They simply will not grow successfully here. Some of the nurseries sell them, and you will plant them, but they often succumb to a bacterial disease called fire blight, and that's why we don't recommend it. So pears, just like Noah's Ark, you need a pair of pears. So you need to plant ideally two similar varieties, which we'll show you some here in a second, that you plant that hopefully will bloom at the same time. So the pollen that the bees looking for nectar pollen is secondary. She goes, gets the nectar, and her hind legs gets the pollen and moves that from one tree to the other. And pears do need to be cross-pollinated. But it is known that unfortunately through this process of pollination, the little honeybee there has the potential in the spring when the flowers are open here to move this bacterium. And that is why we do not recommend those fancier pears, because they do not have resistance to fire blight. So pears that we recommend are fire blight resistant. Pears, like many other plants that we grow in our landscape, are all in the rose family. So if you look at the flowers, you know, they all have the similarities of that family. And the way you distinguish fire blight disease is that shepherd, where the hand is on this image, the shepherd hook appearance. It looks like someone went out all of a sudden and got a blowtorch and burnt limbs and just has that burn effect. And even if you get fire blight resistant varieties, they can still sometimes get it if they're in stressful conditions, i.e. drought, prune too heavy, for over fertilize, and not maintain. So just because you get a resistant variety doesn't mean it might not get it if you're not properly maintaining the tree. Now, some of the varieties that have proven the test of time are Kiefer pear. Now, these pears that we recommend compared to the dessert pears, which we do not recommend, tend to be hard, tend to have a higher grit content. They tend to be not as appealing to a lot of people because they tend to have that rusty appearance on the fruit, but they're quality pears. They will produce for many, many years. If you're not familiar with plantanswers.com, Dr. Parsons has on his fruit tree section a real nice archived article on how to get them soften up these pears so you can use them for a similar as you would do cut it up and use it as a dessert pear and or as a cooking pear. So please visit that article on post-harvest of pears on plantanswers.com. So Kiefer is a fire blight resistant pear, a very good quality pear, been around a long time. Orient is an excellent one as well. Monterey is a selection of Orient. If you can find that, it's nice. But look at that pear. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very delicious. But for a lot of consumers, that look and maybe the high grit content that they have might not be appealing. So it's hard to sell a pear that looks like that, but there's nothing wrong with it. It just has that rust appearance, and that's how pears are, the older varieties that are out there. Garber is an old-fashioned pear, been around a long time. It's a smaller pear, very beautiful color. It's kind of teases you, just like Warren and Ayers. Warren and Ayers are old homestead pears. Garber, Warren, and Ayers. And sometimes they tease you. It's like, when is this tree ever going to give me some fruit? You know, I have pollinators, I see bees, all that good stuff. Sometimes it take a few years before they get into production. But when they do get into production, they're very edible, very delicious, and very productive. So that's a little bit about pears. Don't prune them hard. Don't fertilize them heavy. Pears tend to have what they call a modified central leader to them. So if you look at pears, they're usually multi-trunks that go straight upright. So the key on pears is right variety. Don't over prune them. Don't really even prune them that much. Do not fertilize them heavy and give them that extra water to finish out that fruit load like other fruit trees as well. So plums are related to peaches, apricots, and almonds. We consider all those types of stone fruit. So if you look at an almond, if you open up a peach and a plum and get the seed out, you take the kernel off, inside is the almond, and that's why they refer to them as stone fruit. We really don't recommend growing almonds here in Central and South Texas. Apricots, we really don't recommend apricots. But as soon as I say we don't recommend apricots like the old ones like Moore Park, Blenheim, Royale, Bryant, if you live more north of San Antonio, people will get good at quality apricots out of them. But the problem with apricots, kind of like these older selections of pears, take a few years to come into production, and then it's off years. They might only have a good crop every 3 to 5 years. So we don't really recommend apricots. Plums, if you're going to throw a quarter up in the air, you have a peach or a plum, I would go with plums because they don't need as much training or maintenance as a peach. They will need some spraying if you have disease or potential insect problems. But plums, we would consider an earth kind fruit crop to consider in your home fruit orchard. So we know that peaches typically bloom beautiful pink flowers. And then plums typically bloom a beautiful white flower, as we see these peaches and plums in this image here. Very, very beautiful as well. The two that we recommend in Central and South Texas, and if you go more north of Fredericksburg and beyond, you might try Burbank, and you might try some other ones, Morris, and a few others that require colder temperatures, or what we refer to as chill hours. But Menley and Santa Rosa have always been the two standbys that we have here. So old literature says that most plums, particularly Menley, do not need pollinators. But if you do have room, I would try to grow at least two plums, one Menley and one Santa Rosa, so you can have better cross pollination. Now, let's look at this image as best as we can. As a rule of thumb, for most fruiting trees, and this is hard for a lot of us, to do. But if you see this plum tree, it has lots and lots of fruit on it. Lots of fruit on it. And the trees in general, citrus and other fruiting trees, will abort a certain amount of fruit. But if we have the the time and the energy, ideally what we should be doing in this situation on all our fruit trees is to have one to two fruit per fruiting stem, ideally every 6 inches apart. You don't see that on this. So when they hit about marble to golf ball size, we should be knocking, shaking, taking off at least a third of what we see on this tree. If we do not do this on trees in general, fruit trees in general, what happens is you have smaller fruit. They might not be as sweet. They're not going to be as large. And then the following year, if we overcrop a lot of trees in general, then we have very little to no fruit yield potential the following year. So look at this image and try to follow that as a guideline for most of your fruiting trees as well. Menley's a bigger plum. You can see the fruit wax. Plums are very distinguished. When you see fruit wax on the outskirts, that's good. So for shipping purposes and minimizing spraying potential as well, it's a larger plum than Santa Rosa. Very, very delicious and very reliable. You often see these as well as Santa Rosa at local farmer markets within this area. Santa Rosa is an awesome plum as well. And if you don't thin them, they're small. They can be a little bit tart. But if you do thin them, they become a pretty nice size fruit on them. But Menley and Santa Rosa are two in and around our area of the state that we really have success with as well. The next earth kind, you can make wine out of it. You can make jams and jellies, are figs, and they're very edible. We grow what we refer to as garden figs. And most of the garden figs that we recommend are closed-end figs. Basically, a fig is a confused mulberry. Okay, the fruit are inside out is a good way to do it. Figs are grown as big bushes, okay? So often when you buy them at the nurseries, you buy a little stick, but with time you want to kind of make sure they become a big bush as we see in this picture. Figs get big. You know, most fruit trees like plums and peaches, you know, we try to keep them at 8 to 12 feet tall by proper training on them. Okay, proper training on them, but that way we minimize. Honey, make sure you hold the ladder for me. Oh, the phone just rang. You know, we don't want you guys on ladders, so we got to maintain these trees. So figs and sometimes pomegranates, which is another earth kind tree. I didn't put any slides of pomegranates in there, but that's an earth kind tree too. If they get over 12 feet tall, which they will sometimes do, right now when they're completely dormant, is finding those real tall branches that are 10, 12, 15 feet and bringing them down to where they're attached so we can get them more of a manageable hive, okay? Manageable hive. Now, near Fort Bend County, during World War II, we used to have a huge commercial fig industry for the K rations for the GIs, and with labor and other issues and the demand, that industry kind of plummeted. Figs are also, they bleed. If you cut a stem, they have latex in it, and some people have skin allergies. So also take that in consideration when you do any pruning on them. So the figs that we like are closed-end figs, and the best of the best. It's not a real pretty fig, and it's not a large fig, but we call it the sugar fig. Celeste is the standby name, or if you're in California or the Southeast, sometimes they call them Malta figs. Now, these commercial figs that we see in the Middle East and even out of California that are larger, very delicious. They use for they need pollinators, and it's a specific wasp that you, and we don't have that wasp species here, so we use closed-end figs. Otherwise, the little insects get in that open end, and they will rot out the fruit inside, abort the fruit, and they're not as tasty. So that's why we recommend closed-end figs as well. So look for this one, the Celeste, the sugar fig. Awesome fig. I really like this one. Alma came from the Texas A&M Experiment Station, I believe, in 1974. It has a little resin at the end, but it's still considered a closed-end fig. It's a great variety. A little bit harder to find, but if you can find Alma to add to your fig collection, it's really well worth it as well. And then this one is an old standby, a little bit darker fig called brown turkey, or some people refer to it as Texas ever-bearing fig, and they get the name brown turkey because the leaves of this fig tree look like a turkey foot. So that's why they call it brown turkey. So those are the three closed-end garden figs that we like: Celeste, Alma, and the brown turkey. So look for them. Again, read up more about them on the publications on the A&M Aggie Horticulture website. Excuse me. The other earth kind tree that I really like, and even if you don't really care for the fruit, as a landscape, small landscape tree, it's very beautiful, are Oriental Persimmons. And Oriental Persimmons, there's many varieties. Now, when you buy the standard one, like what they refer to as Japanese, our Fuyu persimmon, which is probably the one that's sold the most around the state, those are what we call non-astringent varieties, meaning if you let it turn color, orangey color on the tree, if you can protect it and let it soften on the tree, or if you harvest it, some people will wrap them with aluminum foil, the fruit, put them in the freezer a day or so. It really softens it up, and it's going to be as sweet as candy. A lot of people don't like these persimmons because they're so sweet, but you can dry that fruit and dehydrate them and eat them as persimmon chips as well, which are very tasty. So all these other varieties that are out there, which are typically higher grade fruit, larger fruit, and tend to be more abundant, are Hachi and Tamalpam and all those. But those are all varieties that are we refer to as astringent. So if you can get them, soften them up on the tree without the birds getting to them, they're very delicious, high-grade persimmon. But if you get them a little bit too early, you might say, they'll pucker you up and give you cotton mouth, okay? Cotton mouth. So that's why a lot of people go with the Japanese or Fuyu persimmon. But try these other ones. They're a lot of fun to grow. Very little to no input on them. and the American persimmon, which is indigenous to like East Texas and the southeast part of the United States. You know, if you do any golfing, the old best golf clubs, which were handmade, used to be made out of persimmon wood. So it's a very high quality wood as well. And I like these trees. The fruit are excellent. I remember visiting many a time when Mr. Beck, Malcolm Beck, the founder of Gardenville, the grandfather of Texas organic gardening, we used to visit with him out there. He used to have a whole grove of so many selections of persimmons. But the issue is, if you plant more than one variety of persimmon and they have the potential to cross pollinate, you tend to have a lot of seed in them. And that could kind of, the fruit doesn't look as pretty inside, and the seed can be an issue. So if you just go with one variety and plant two or three of that same variety, they become what you call parthenocarpic. Parthenocarpic mean they'll set fruit, but they tend not to have seed in them. So you make the choice and see what grows best for you. But persimmons, I think, need to be planted more, and they do follow in the earth kind low input fruit tree selections as well. They give you beautiful fall color, and that's another plus for them, and that's why I like them. You know, certain trees like peaches and plums give you the blooms, a little bit of fall color, and persimmons are probably one of the best fall color trees. And y'all remember, particularly here in and around San Antonio, how a lot of the trees gave us so much fall color this year. They were so beautiful this year. So we mentioned these few trees here. Aggie Horticulture website. Take the Earth Kind Challenge to see how good of a environmental steward you are in general for the overall picture of your landscape, and then utilize this website, particularly under the fruit trees section, to learn more about these trees that we covered here. I like to talk about blackberries. Blackberries, if you're looking for hedge type in and around the San Antonio area, Kiowa and Roseboro have really proven the test of time for us, and they're a lot of fun to grow. Of course, they have thorns, which can be kind of an issue. You don't have to grow a lot of these plants. Just do a real good job on the few that you grow. So this is a blackberry around March, April. Last year's growth is this year's flowers that we see, the white flowers on the bottom, and those will produce the fruit this year. Then the new growth that comes this year in April or May are those straight upright shoots that we see in this image. Once those shoots hit about 4 feet or so, we want to top those in half so they become bushier. And this year's growth will be next year's flowers that will produce next year's fruit. So after we harvest the fruit this spring, early summer, and get all the fruit that we can, and wear gloves and long sleeve shirts with these ones that have thorns, then we want to trim those out. So you have to put some inputs into them. Again, be it a shade tree or any type of plant, pick the ones that you want to eat, that you want to grow, and you don't need a lot of these plants. Just do a real good job on all these fruits that we've talked about or that you want to try in your home fruit orchard. Beautiful flowers, again, they're in the rose family. Bees will go to them, help with the pollination a little bit with them. And we'll talk about this blackberry here, but remember, most blackberries are red. So we really don't recommend raspberries here, but there are a few out there that you might want to try. But blackberries turn red, then they go black. They have a certain sheen, then they go semi-dull. They have a little bit softness in the fruit. Harvest it, try it, and that's when you know that they should be at the peak of performance for quality. Now, we talked about this first blackberries. Kiowa and Roseboro If you can find the old small Brazos blackberry, which is charter, that's very a good blackberry, but they're a little bit harder to find nowadays. All the blackberries research comes from the University of Arkansas. We work with those guys quite a bit because they do a lot of work in our winter garden on spinach as well. So we designated this thornless blackberry called Natchez. And it was so good that we designated it statewide as a Texas superstar plant. That means it's a high rating to be designated as a Texas superstar plant. You want to learn about the Texas Superstar Plant Program? We also have that on the homepage of the Aggie Horticulture website. This is thornless, but Natchez is awesome. Two things about Natchez is you got to grow it like a grape, almost like a trellising system. Okay. That means just like grapes, you have to train it. You do have to do some pruning on it and hard pruning on it so it doesn't encompass and choke the growth of the plant out. So, like grapes, we do 60 to 90%. Right when they look like they're leafing out, we trim back grapes and this Natchez blackberry 60 to 90% and kind of retrain some of those vines up on the trellising system that we have, tying them and doing all that good stuff. But Natchez is an awesome one. If you have, we had a Ronnie Wheeler who used to be the biggest strawberry grower down in Petite. You know, he said he's going to retire and all that, but then he was growing about 5 acres of this, and maybe HEB will have a blackberry cobbler if they haven't done one already with blackberries, because that would be awesome, just like they do the strawberry creamy creations ice cream as well. So there we go, trellising. And so those are the ones. Look for figs, look for these blackberries, look for these persimmons, and I think those are all worth earth kind as well as Texas superstar type consideration. A couple other ones I like to throw in here is grapes. We're not going to talk about in depth on grapes, but we designated Victoria Red, which was really one of P.D. Munson's grape selections, as well as the University of Arkansas releasing this years back. It come from Victoria, Texas. There, it's very hard to grow grapes for the home gardener here. And Victoria Red would be the best candidate, I would say, for not only wine potential, but for table grape quality. Large cluster of about 1.5 pound grapes, large fruit on it, individual grapes on it, almost seedless, beautiful red color. And it fits into like Champanelle, Black Spanish, or what we call Lenoir, Blanc du Bois, which is all those are candidates for home gardeners because why? They have Pierce's disease resistant, which is a big potential issue on commercial vineyards. So look for this one. Again, it's designated as a Texas superstar plant. You do have to trellis it and train it as well. Now look at this picture. Isn't that so beautiful, these grapes? But look at this picture real close, particularly if you live in San Antonio or residential areas. And what did I say? Follow those principles we talked about earlier to get your 90%. Never brag when a crop is coming in, because we have a lot of city creatures, squirrels, birds, two-legged neighbors, raccoons, possums, just to name a few. So we have issues. We have issues out there. So look at the bird netting on this thing. Look at the bird netting. You know, you got to defend and secure as a farmer your investment. So you got to defend these things with netting, trickery, things that shimmer, things that glisten. You know, we talked, I think, on our last webinar, everybody makes these silly New Year's resolutions, you know, that we're going to lose weight. My dog's overweight. You know, let's get our dogs out there to exercise maybe do their job as they were bred many moons ago to keep these animals away from our fruit and our vegetables and things like that. Victoria Red Grape is an awesome Texas superstar grape, folks. I think it'll be well worth if you haven't added this to your home fruit orchard, and you're really going to enjoy the quality of this because this is the closest thing that we can really long term and successfully grow a table grape as well. I'm going to add strawberries because strawberries is a fruit. We plant strawberries typically from September through early November. We overwinter them. Now we're letting them grow. We have a contingency plan if it gets super cold now through February. But we did designate festival as a Texas Superstar strawberry a couple years ago. But strawberries are fun growing them in hanging baskets, which the nurseries are selling right now. Strawberry pots or raised beds, and 1 pound, one plant equals 1 pound of quality marketable fruit. So again, y'all see the Florida and the California strawberries at market. They always have white caps on them. If you grow your own strawberries, and a good project to get the kids involved, you can get them red to maroon to peak of perfection as a home gardener, because you don't see the white caps on them. They have to ship them like that so they don't make strawberry juice by the time they get to market. But us, we can make them, get them, because they're non-climateric fruit. They're not going to ripen after they pick them, so we can pick them at peak of perfection there. I'm going to throw a hard one in. This is our last slide of fruit that we're covering today. Then we'll get to some questions here. Is blueberries. Dr. Stein and Dr. Larry Stein, Dr. Jerry Parsons did a lot of work on this particular blueberry called Tiff Blue blueberry. Yes, you can grow blueberries here, but it takes a lot of work. So again, on the Aggie Horticulture website and on the plantanswers.com website, we have all the information on growing Tiff Blue blueberry in a container. You have to collect rainwater. You have to put them in a peat-based media, meaning 80% Canadian peat moss, and then cut that with maybe 20% petite red sand or planting sand, 20% compost, and mix that up. Maybe a handful of high yield aluminum sulfate, and maybe shade them if possible in this July, August heat. And then don't worry about the cold weather here. But yes, you can grow blueberries. There's Premier, Sunshine, O'Neill, but those need pollinators. Tiff Blue is self-pollinating. But if you have room for 2, 3, 4 varieties in these big 20-inch diameter containers that drain well, like this half whiskey barrel, you can grow them here. They're a lot of fun to grow here. Blue fruit is rare for birds around here, so if you don't cover these or net these, they're going to eat every fruit when you're 2 days out. So you're going to have to cover them, and they are a lot of fun. I challenge everyone to grow a couple of these blueberries and enjoy them because they're high like pomegranates, quality fruit, high in antioxidants, and they're a fun treat for the kids to go out and pick your fresh blueberries in the morning and add it to your morning breakfast. Awesome, awesome. These are what we refer to as rabbit eye blueberries. With the first bad NAFTA deal that they made, like our winter garden, East Texas took a big hit on the blueberry industry, but our Southeast is still doing a pretty good job. But for you as home gardeners, do it, try it. They're a lot of fun to grow, and they're really well worth growing blueberries and getting the kids involved. And do 2 or 3 plants and grow them like you see this image. A lot of fun, and blueberries are awesome to grow. So we mentioned Aggie Horticulture, plantanswers.com. Of course, the Bexar County Extension Service website has a lot of great archived information. And we, on the front page of the A&M Bexar County Extension website, we have other webinars from my colleagues when they're doing other educational presentations. We're still not face to face, Still doing online. I missed. Our last one was last March, folks. Almost a year for my last face-to-face, and God willing, we'll get back to it. I noticed that we only have about 100 people today or so. We're limited since we're doing these free. So I know a few people are probably going to send me emails upset they couldn't get online. But we do have this archived because it costs us money to do these things if we go above 100. But visit this. It's going to be archived. But I want y'all to do me a favor, not only spread the word on My Extension 210, the YouTube channel, where this and other subject matter and horticulture is archived, but please subscribe to it. Please subscribe to it. You know, it doesn't take that much effort to just subscribe to it and help us get the word out as well. My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Listen to me every Saturday. 15 years with Bill, my radio mentor. You know, a lot of kids don't know what that word is, mentor, anymore. We need to have mentors, even at my age. You know, he's Dr. Parsons and Dr. Parsons and Bill Rohde is my radio mentor. So listen to us every Saturday on the 1200 AM WOAI radio show. Again, that's my email address. We did not talk about citrus. We do have a real good one on patio and landscape citrus archived on My Extension 210, and probably we'll do another one during the year when I think it's about appropriate for the seasonal time of citrus. But if we have a couple minutes, I don't know if Denise or Ruby is doing the questions today, but thank y'all for joining us. Let's all hold on for about 10 minutes and answer some fruit tree related questions, and that way we can all learn. And again, send me an email if we didn't get to your question today. Go ahead, Denise.
Hi, David. It's Ruby.
Oh, Ruby, I'm sorry. Hi, Ruby.
Hi. So we have a lot of questions in the chat. So I'm just going to start with the first one and then work the way down. And then looks like we only have 11 minutes for one. So David, you tell me when it's time to ask the last question, and then any questions that aren't asked today, you know, can be emailed to David, and his email address is right there.
Awesome.
So our first question comes from Diana, and it's really just a request. She's asking if you could please talk a little bit about dwarf avocados for San Antonio.
Yeah, well, are there, that's a good question. Find me one. Find me one. I don't think we have one that's out there. We do need one. And when I say find me one, this is something that's been grown, that the nurseries have true dwarf avocados that they can get, not out of Florida, but that they can sell locally from a Texas grown source. So we don't have any. So if you have one, try it. Avocados will fit in the same category as peach trees, not necessarily as high input, but if you live here in the San Antonio area, you know, Dr. Parsons always used to say a silly thing. You see an Ice House, a Valero, an HEB, a Bill Miller's on every corner here. How many avocados do you see? Very, very few. The ones that have been grown successfully here are in old neighborhoods, particularly the inner loop of the 410 area, deeper soils, microclimates is a key word, microclimates, right? Maybe grandma or abuelita planted that seed. They got to go through the juvenility stage, protected from the cold winters, and they might be producing. But the vast majority of those avocados, even if they produce fruit, the quality is not there. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge, the winter and the quality. If you look at the nurseries, they have some varieties out there. The closest one that I think we can grow here successfully, if you meet those conditions, which I just mentioned right now, is Joey. Joey looks like the traditional avocado we buy, which is the Mexican or Haas avocado. If you want to try that, try it. If you find this dwarf one, grow it and tell me what variety it is and what kind of success you've had with it. Remember, a shade tree and fruit tree takes a lifetime to see and evaluate these things, right? So, a lot of these things are novelty, but maybe we have one that's good, that's a true dwarf. But as I know right now, we don't have one. Good question.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Doug, and he says, every time I prune my fig tree, the production drops to nothing the next year, and the tree grows back, the leaves and branches I trimmed off. So when and how is the best way to prune it?
Okay, so fig trees. Remember, we should be growing garden figs, Celeste, brown turkey, and Alma, if you can find it, are the three best fig trees. So look at them now when they're dormant. The month of January, we grow figs as like pomegranates, multi-trunk. So you can start pruning them right now. Um, Figs are very susceptible to root knot nematodes. So you have to keep mulching, building up that soil with compost over time. Put some compost over your mulch every year. Prune no more than a 1/3. And if they're overgrown, it takes you 3 years to get them where you need to be, right? Figs can potentially grow off of old and potentially the Berea figs off of new growth, potentially, if you're growing these right varieties. So unless it's freezing down every year, you're probably pruning it too harsh. So just leave it alone. You know, when it leaves out, if it has dead wood in it from a hard winter, then you would remove that dead wood. But you're probably pruning it too hard. Or again, it goes back to the principles. It's not receiving enough sunlight, or you're fertilizing it too much. Look at the leaves. If you're fertilizing with too much nitrogen or too much fertilizer, you're probably getting more leaves over fruit potential. So look at all those things that you might be doing. Do minimum pruning, train it more than pruning, and see how it would perform thereafter.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Bryce. He asks, will deer eat or damage citrus trees when they're young?
Will deer eat or damage citrus trees? Anything we like to eat, the deer are going to eat. Simple. Very simple. If you're in deer country, you know what you have to do for shade trees and fruit trees, particularly young trees. You have to cage them. You have to cage them until they get big enough and harden off wood on them. You got to cage them. So I think deer season for does just ended Sunday. So you should have taken the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question uh, is she is from Rachel, and she's looking to uh, learn about plants that she can plant near her fruit trees. She's limited on space, and she wants to make the best use of it.
Well, that's a very difficult question. I would for sure go to the Texas Superstar website. And the vast majority of Texas Superstar plants, and you can go off the Aggie Horticulture website. The vast majority of Texas Superstar plants are perennials. So I would plant perennials and most of those bloom quite a bit throughout the year. And why do we want things blooming? Well, that helps benefit with beneficial insects. So that would possibly reduce your insect population if you bring in a lot of good beneficial insects. But most important, bees and other pollinating potential insects. So that's how I would approach that. So go with hardy perennials like Mystic Spire salvia and things like that bloom. They look pretty and they'll bring in those types of good insects.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Karen. She would like to know if you can please go over spray schedules for peach trees. What sprays, when, and how to apply them, brands of dormant oils, or if there's a possible online resource about this.
Well, the online resources we've talked about multiple times today is the Aggie Horticulture website. So it has all that information. But years back, we used to have all these spray charts and all this information. But the arsenal has diminished for the home gardener. Pretty soon we'll have those rocks there to the right to kill bugs. So y'all are very limited. So this is how I approach this. I still recommend dormant oil on peaches and plums because of scale potential. So that's typically when they're dormant during the month of January, February, before they leaf out. All products that you buy, lesson learned and reviewed, is we always read and follow label instructions, particularly how to mix it, how to dilute it, do's and don'ts of temperature, etc. Dormant oil, or what they call horticulture grade oil, sometimes referred to as all season summer oil. The oil, you have to, the viscosity of that oil potential in there, you have to shake it up, shake it up, shake it up, shake it up when you're spraying out there on the right day. So that's one thing. Insecticides, for most of us, we're limited, and anything that the nursery garden center has for fruit or vegetable, use it. It could be traditional permethrin type insecticides. It could be organic based like spinosad, which is broad spectrum. It could be neem oil, which is also broad spectrum insecticide as well as fungicide. Um, so you're limited. You can add maybe insecticidal soap to that. Malathion is traditionally what they use commercially still in California. So don't limit your arsenal. The key is uh, alternate, and then that's the same with fungicides. So you're limited on fungicides, but whatever you can purchase over the counter, read the active ingredient and get 2 or 3 different ones. Now, a good rule of thumb: prophylactically spraying, since there's no commercial organic peach orchards that have been successful in Texas, these guys spray once every 7 to 10 days. They might alternate with an insecticide, then a fungicide, alternating those 2 or 3 that you've purchased, always following label instructions. If they're flowering, then you spray more as your squash, zucchini, or cucumbers in the evening as the bees are gone back to the colony, not in the morning. So use that as a good rule of thumb. Read up on what's available at your local nursery garden center. And particularly since we promote independent nurseries, get to know a Texas certified independent nursery professional, and they'll help you as well on those guidelines.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Alan. He asks, do you have any recommendations on nurseries that advertise rootstock? Uh, I am looking for a Lovell or Halford for alkaline for highly alkaline soils.
Yeah, you can check with Walmart's nursery in De Leon and see if he's specifically uh, growing the trees on those rootstocks that you're looking for, or if you source them a year in advance, he can probably get what you want on that specific rootstock. Of course, you're going to pay a premium price. Grafted trees, you're paying for the labor and skill, so you're paying a premium price. So look at Walmex Nursery in De Leon. Look at these independent nurseries around town, because a lot of the trees will be labeled on what rootstock they're using, and or talk to your independent nursery professional. Mark or Mike Fanick at Fanick's Nursery, Trace at Millburgers, Ronnie at Rainbow Gardens, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're looking for something specific, you're the customer. And it might take them next year to get it. But if you're willing to be patient and pay a premium price, they can do that outsourcing for you with the grower and distributor that they work with. But it's going to take them a year if they do not have it currently in inventory.
Okay, thank you, David. These next couple of questions are just for review. David, if you could please review over the best fruit trees that are good producers and kind of pear trees that you recommend.
Okay, so we want to kind of focus on earth kind, which was today's presentation. So pears, which are fire blight resistant, you know, that's the key on pears, and you have a lot of them. So Kiefer, Orient, Garber, just to name a few. Plums, which are earth kind, would be Santa Rosa and Mentley. Those would be the main ones for plums. And then figs would be the closed-end figs, or what we refer to as garden figs. Celeste, Alma, and brown turkey. And again, this webinar will be archived. You just got to give Ruby, she does such a wonderful job. Thank you, Ruby and Denise, again. They will have all this archived on the My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Give them a few days, and then we have other subject matter also archived there.
Okay, thank you, David. The next question comes from Kathy. She's wondering, what are some good peach trees for Brazario County, Alvin, Lake Jackson area?
Okay, they have a good horticulturalist over there. Contact their Brazario County Extension Service, and your independent nurseries there will give you the best recommendations, since they've been doing this longer than I have in Brazario, and they should be able to give you, or they have an awesome Master Gardener program over there, which your county agent oversees. They should have that list for you. So we'll do one more question there, Ruby. Please.
Okay, thanks, David. This next question is from Vine Wellness, and they ask, should figs have the root flare exposed? And if so, how should they be mulched afterwards?
Okay, so figs are not grafted. Okay, most of all the other fruit trees that we've talked about, particularly peaches and plums and pecans, most fruit trees are grafted, and that's why you pay a little bit premium price on. Figs are not grafted, okay? But all fruit trees should be mulched twice a year, like early May. That way you let the temperatures warm up to help them leaf out and fruit earlier. So early May, and coming out of the heat of the summer, early September, 2-inch layer of a good local mulch. Locally for Central and South Texas, we like double shredded hardwood mulch with compost, which is a living mulch. But figs, put it on thicker, 4 to 6 inches. You want thick mulch, thick mulch. That means with big leaves and fruit production, you have to put 2 inches of water a week on them in lieu of significant rain if you have fruit load on them. But they like mulch, particularly to build up that soil to prevent root knot nematode issues over time. So like any tree that's grafted, figs are not grafted. Like any tree, you plant it at the same depth as it was grown in the container. Gently remove it out of the container, gently place it in the ground. Never put excess soil or mulch up on that crown. If anything else, when you plant them, remove an extra inch away from that trunk, and you can start seeing those roots, which we refer to as flare roots, coming off that main trunk. If you can follow that as a guideline, you're doing great. Thank you, Ruby and Denise, and all our listeners today. If we didn't get to your question, please look at the archives on the My Extension 210. And please, particularly with this free webinars that we're doing today, subscribe and pass the word on, please. and look at all the other cool subject matter we have on the My Extension 210 YouTube channel. Listen to me every Saturday, and then send emails. We'll try to get them answered the best we can. Send me quality images. Remember, we're always learning, have fun, and happy gardening, everyone. Have a great day.